Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's 6:02 p.m. on October 5th, 2023. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. With me, Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the planning board. With me tonight is Vice Chair Amelia Aboff. We've also got members Michael McNeely, Luke Schuster, and Debbie Howard Easton. We've got a few items on our agenda tonight, but pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the planning board will be conducted via remote participation. An audio recording of these proceedings will be available by using the registration link once the meeting has concluded. This meeting is being recorded. As I said, we have a number of items on our agenda. The first is 620 Broadway. They have requested a continuance to November 2, 2023. I'm sorry, we do have a quorum. I've called that out. I've listed the members, and that does constitute a quorum. 620 Broadway has requested a continuance to November 2, 2023. Chair moves to continue that agenda item to November 2, seconded by Amelia. Rice, can you please call the roll?
This is Rice speaking. Michael Capuano.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Okay, that agenda item is continued with a unanimous vote. The next on the agenda is 45 Mystic Avenue. Rice, it's my understanding that this applicant has also requested a continuance. Can you please remind me the date to which they've requested a continuance?
This is Rice speaking. This applicant has requested a continuance to the October 19th planning board meeting.
Okay. The chair moves to continue this agenda item to the October 19th meeting, seconded by Amelia. Rice, can you please call the roll?
Michael Capuano.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Okay, that agenda item is continued with the unanimous vote. The next and last item on our agenda is to make a recommendation to the Land Use Committee and the City Council on the, I want to say, the fourth of four zoning amendments that were subject to a joint hearing several weeks ago. This one, we had left the written comment period open for longer because we wanted the applicant to hold a neighborhood meeting prior to us being able to make a recommendation. And it's my understanding that that meeting has occurred. We have received a number of items of written comment as well as all of the oral comment that we heard during the first iteration of this public hearing. I'm sorry, this is NRL WSC 200 Inner Belt Road Prop LLC. This is the application to change the zoning district of 200 Inner Belt Road from commercial to high rise. So with those items out of the way and with public testimony now having been received, this is now open for the planning board's discussion for recommendation to the Land Use Committee. So I would like to open it up for discussion by members of the board. Does anybody have any particular discussion or items or questions of staff? We do have Sarah Lewis, the Director of Planning, here with us. Yes, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question for Director Lewis, which was, I understand that part of the applicant's goal in proposing this map change is to open up funding that could be available for a pedestrian bridge. And it sounded like that was an initiative that was taken on in conjunction with city staff. And I guess my question is, if this is something that the city is in support of, is there a reason that the map change wouldn't have been proposed by the administration? Because as I tried to juggle the sort of private sector interest here and the civic interest here, that was something that I was definitely curious to understand better.
Through the chair, that's actually a very, very good question. And it's more about a matter of timing and process. So, sort of we've been showing in the draft neighborhood plan for Brick Bottom, we have been showing a pedestrian bridge to get people to the community path and to connect to the T station from both Brick Bottom and the Inabel side. As the neighborhood plan is still in its draft form, adoption was paused on that as we complete a fiscal analysis, just to make sure this is an area where there will be a fair amount of infrastructure, including potentially a pedestrian bridge. And so we had been asked by the administration to make sure we understood what those repercussions were of what we were proposing in the neighborhood plan. In the meantime, as the property owner owns both sides of the tracks, they had been meeting with the MBTA. We have been involved in those discussions all the way along. But then there was an opportunity to apply for MassWorks funding. In conversations with the Lieutenant Governor's office, there was a request that housing be included in the application, which, as far as what we were submitting for that grant, would look at the triangle site to the north of the existing Interbelt building as a location for housing, very sort of proximate, abutting practically the T station, so true TOD. And then the reason that the existing building was included in the request is that is a landlocked parcel and would need access along the front of the existing building to reach that parcel. The high-rise designation was more about the residential use than the actual height or massing of the building. Some of the comments that came up in the neighborhood meeting were concern about the guarantee that if North River sells the parcel, there is no guarantee in place that their good intentions would continue to a new owner. And I think the entire area, a lot of what we heard was nervousness around something as large as the 200 McGrath proposal coming in on that site, and access and mobility issues, given the limited study that has been done within Interbelt itself for a traffic perspective, even though it would be, sort of right on the T station, and we would expect that to have limited vehicular access, but obviously there would be some. So it would need, sort of, the neighborhood wanted further study. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
It gave a lot of context. Thank you. Sorry, may I ask a follow-up question, actually? Will we have the opportunity to apply for that MassWorks funding in a future funding cycle, if not at this time?
I believe the application was already submitted, but yes, we would. Sorry, I was going to say, as long as we comply with MBTA communities and the Section 3A, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is for Director Lewis as well. As we've been kind of having a dialogue with the applicant, was there ever an ask for the developer to potentially fund the bridge without this grant? You know, assuming that all parties from the city and state would cooperate, MBTA, et cetera, on easements and stuff like that, would the applicant be interested in potentially funding that if they weren't able to secure this grant?
I have not been part of the discussions to know if that question has been asked bluntly. I'm sure it has.
Mm.
It is, you know, sort of because it's in the city's interest of connecting neighborhoods. That's sort of where it's like if we can assist and, you know, sort of help facilitate, we are doing that. But whether they would fund it solely on their own without our assistance, I do not know that.
Debbie or Luke, because I have a question or two, but I always like to let my colleagues ask first in case I become redundant. Yeah, Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Director Lewis. This is just such a basic question, but it follows on Member Aboff's line of questions. Just to confirm here, so is the planning staff in support of this, even though it's not your proposal, or are you silent on one direction or another?
We are, as it was included in the draft plan, we are in support of it because you know, sort of when the conversation started as a theory, you know, sort of the neighborhood seemed pretty responsive to it as part of the vision plan. Any connectivity that we can get, we're definitely in support of. I think was this an ideal timing process? Absolutely not. You know, sort of it's been a little bit scrambled because we had this opportunity to apply for the grant.
Thanks for that. And I guess one follow-up on the not ideal timing, just to confirm, the not ideal timing is fully about the state grant cycle and not about the owner of the site pushing this too fast or something. I mean, this city staff sense is that we are collectively being nimble in a situation that's forcing that choice.
That was, yes, that's a good way of saying it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. Anybody else has any other comments or questions? I have two. Both of you, Sarah, which is I think the most appropriate person to be answering the questions. So the first part is, having reviewed the testimony that we received on this, right? It was almost exclusively, if not exclusively, from neighbors in the Brook Bottom area, who will be very close to this project, obviously. And the concerns that I saw was that it was going to be kind of overwhelming for the neighborhood with the size and scope of a potential high-rise building. And the second one that I saw was the lack of or the detraction from what is already somewhat of an art-based neighborhood with artist space and maker space and things like that. So my two questions, kind of a derivative of the concerns that I saw in the public testimony. So as to the size and the scope and the scale of a potential high-rise building, as I'm remembering when we looked at Somervision and the comprehensive zoning overhaul that we did about 3 years ago, that involved a huge amount of public testimony over the span of about 8 years. As I recall, Brick Bottom was one of the areas that was designated as a place to try to transform. Is that still right? And one
That
of
is correct.
Okay. And one of the ideas of transformation was taking kind of these single story, low slung, old automotive and industrial uses and building them up. So this would fit in as well as commercial industrial with what the comprehensive zoning overhaul as well as the Somervision plans both envisioned. Is that
That is true.
Okay. That's what I thought. And part two, and this is something that I was reminded of earlier, and I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the second concern, the primary concern that I saw with the residents, which is the feeling that we're going to lose artist space and maker space and creative space by building a high-rise building. It's my recollection that high-rise under our zoning is required to put in some artist and creative space. And I guess I'm asking two things. One, if you can just make sure that I'm not saying something that's incorrect. And two, if you might be able to explain a little bit about what that intensity of zoning in a high-rise building would look like, such that it wouldn't just be a luxury high-rise building or whatever it's going to be.
So I'll start with yes, a high-rise requires arts and creative enterprise use set aside space. That varies from an architect's office to fine art studios to the major requirement that ISD has put on it is it must be operated separately. So in other words, a lobby of an apartment building that might have a changing art collection is not ACE space officially. So there are some restrictions around what that could be. Obviously, sort of different owners have different propensities to different art types. The Arts Council has Michael is been on board, and he is going to be working out the programs with the artists. So how those spaces might be used. The draft plan also for Brick Bottom proper does envision that as an arts district, and every intent is being made to recommend programs, recommend locations, recommend we're working on architectural design guidelines so that the industrial, there might be an industrial type of architecture style that sort of more closely reflects the existing buildings, such as Brick Bottom Lofts or some of the brickwork from 86 Joy Street studios. So incorporating some of those elements in what the sort of anticipated development might be. It's also, to your point about the transform area as well, this is not only as a designated transform area, but it is sort of very much transit oriented. The train station is right there. So that's one of the things that we've always envisioned is increased density around the train stations. But where in neighborhoods where we have existing buildings, sort of the making sure that we transition appropriately to the existing buildings and make sure that we aren't undermining the character of an existing neighborhood. So it's a balancing act, obviously. But yeah, the ACE space is, and we do have commitments that Joyce Street Studios will remain in Brick Bottom. So what that looks like, yeah, we sort of we don't know, but they will remain.
Thank you. I'm certainly not going to put myself in the position to define what is and is not, art. I think that's kind of the entire purpose of art, right? But no, I'm glad you were able to explain to me and to folks kind of what that means and what we're envisioning for the neighborhood and making sure that it remains art focused, because that's what it is, now. And I think it would be a detriment to the city to lose something like that, even if it's relocated in a repurposed building that fits what we're hoping to do with transformation of the neighborhood next to a T-stop. Even if that T-stop only goes 3 miles an hour right now. That'll hopefully be fixed in the next 40 years.
Unfortunately, that's nothing the city can do anything about.
I know. And we've shut down half the green line between Haymarket and whatever it is. It's a hot mess, but it's not our hot mess. It's somebody else's. So okay. No, I appreciate the discussion by members and questions by members of the board, and I appreciate you, Sarah, having been here with us tonight. Like I said, we've taken public testimony both orally and through written comment, and that comment period expired on Friday at noon, last Friday at noon. So comment period and testimony is closed. We've received I want to say 87 pages of written testimony that we received the other day and reviewed. So I don't know if there's anything else that folks want to raise before we move along. I see Debbie's hand and Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, Sarah, this is for you as well. And just to follow on Mike's discussion, I know the Arts Council has been doing a risk assessment on artist space, and I think there's some proposed zoning changes that may come out of that. Do you know what sort of the timeline is on when those might be enacted and how that might impact this area?
So through the chair, that is, we are obviously working extremely closely with the Arts Council on this. So the general principle of it is to make sure, when we had first drafted the overhaul, the thought was to be fairly broad and let arts and creative enterprises sort of define what they are. What had happened in the meantime is the artists were seeing that I'm going to call them more lucrative enterprises were taking some of the spaces that were intended to be artist studios. So this will be a clarification of definitions as to what is arts and what is a creative enterprise. So what might be a more of a fabrication use, like a craft brewery, for example. That language is being refined internally. We had a listening session the other week with the artists that went well. There were some interesting points that were brought up, so we're making sure that we've got those included. It will not affect Brick Bottom directly, but might affect anything that is a fabrication district, or there's currently matte fabrication. where the studios in Brick Bottom already exist, they remain as is, as that use can, you know, sort of will continue and doesn't affect, unless it will only affect new spaces that are created moving forward.
So it could change the look of what the ACE proposal in an HR building, what might be able to be housed in a new building built in an HR district. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like there's a consensus building around support for this perhaps, and I have some reservations and concerns I'd like to voice for the consideration of my fellow board members, and I also would welcome Director Lewis to push back on these if I'm misunderstanding something. We have often been faced with this question of a developer who has like a great plan that would bring a community benefit, but it's out of sync with the community planning process and feels like spot zoning. And I have always voiced concerns in those situations about the fact that, again, I work for a real estate developer. Developers like to entitle things to build lots of stuff and then flip them. And I have no way of developing a higher degree of confidence for really any parcel that there will be a commitment to a developer to sort of follow through on the nominal, theoretical, high-level commitments that they have voiced in the one community meeting that's being held about this. I think that entitling this to allow for high-rise would create a real liability for the artist community that's there presently and which has been very vocal in our community participation process. And while this developer may not have the intention of building a high-rise lab building or what have you on that footprint, they would be allowed to do so. And the only remaining leverage or oversight that this board would have would be the site plan approval process, which, as we all know, is not really discretionary, in which there are some real boundaries around what we can and can't manage or otherwise push back on once it is in place. There are a number of other zoning mechanisms that occur to me that could achieve what the developer says they want and what the city says they want here. And I'm curious whether, and I would be really supportive of a revised version of this amendment that did one of those. So perhaps an MR district, which also would check the box for allowing residential, but which would cap it at an appropriate height and could bring some more confidence to the neighborhood, to the immediate neighborhood, that there's not sort of an open entitlement for something that's a higher density than would be comfortable. At the same time, I'm generally in favor of density where it is appropriate. And I know that we are very close here to the edge of the master plan overlay district. And the master plan overlay district could allow the kind of height that we're talking about, but with all of the discretionary approvals that come with the overlay district rules and regulations, this board then can have a lot more power to shape what, to ensure a developer will follow through on the plans they've voiced and on their commitments. So I feel incredibly uncomfortable about this amendment as it's currently drafted, but with either or both of those adjustments would be in support of it. And I don't feel like rushing to meet this funding cycle is a reason to do something sloppy if there is a better way available that could put in place more of those guardrails for the community and ensure the ultimate development will be in lockstep with the plan that is being proposed.
Amelia, thank you. I just want to remind folks kind of what our role right now is. We have a plan in front of us. We have a proposal in front of us, and our sole role here is to make a recommendation to the land use committee and the council. That recommendation could include, and usually does include, as I think we all know, commentary on the perceived strengths and weaknesses of the proposal in front of us. So I certainly hear what you're saying, and I think it makes sense in the way I look at it, is in whatever recommendation we make, to say we're generally supportive of X if that's where we're at, but we think it might be better if you did Y. Understanding that what we have in front of us is what we have in front of us, and this is the recommendation that we have to make. So we can't we can't change the recommendation. We can say, we have the recommendation, here's what we feel about the recommendation. But we would prefer if you considered X, Y, and Z. Which I would be in support of. I think that makes a lot of sense. And this is what we've done kind of traditionally is, voice general support and add caveats. So if that's something that the board is comfortable with doing, I'm certainly there with you.
Mr. Chair, I would definitely be open to including commentary reflecting the suggestions I just made. I would not be in favor of a yes recommendation on this application. I would be in favor of a no recommendation with that note, but I will see where other folks stand.
So I'm in support. I'm a yes with commentary. If you're a no with commentary and the board might be split, I'd kind of like to poll my colleagues before we take a vote on this. We could always do kind of what we've traditionally done is a no recommendation, not a denial, a no recommendation with commentary, but I'd like to see where people are at, because the proposal as it stands, I'm generally in support with some guardrails that you've outlined. I also don't want us to fall short of being able to qualify for potential free money by not moving forward on this.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I?
Mhm.
There are other things we could do that I think would check the box to enable us to get the free money. The application that's in front of us is for the most aggressive, the most unlimited version of that. And so why we would accept that when something more that had more conservative approach or more guardrails would also enable that free money is lost on me, I'm afraid.
Because I could, for me as one member, I could see both sides of it, and I'm not particularly wedded to either. That's the only reason is I think both can get us there, and I'm happy to vote either a no recommendation or a yes. With the commentary that we've discussed. Does anybody else have any thoughts on where they would like to be on this? Yep, I see Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did see member McNeely's hand first. Happy to.
Oh,
defer to
I
him.
didn't see
You
you.
first.
I'm sorry.
You first, Luke.
I am curious if Director Lewis wants to respond to what member Aboff said, and if not immediately, I appreciated member Aboff's questions and comments, and it sparked a couple other questions for me that sort of, build off some of what you were saying. But Director Lewis, do you want to say anything, or should we throw more questions in the hopper? And
I see this as part of the board's discussion, so I don't have any response or any comments right now.
The question I have, and again, I'm sort of embarrassed to ask this, but maybe other members have this question too, is trying to home in on why high rise is the proposal. And am I reading right that the stated intent of the current developer is to do all housing there? And maybe I'm not quite right on that assumption, but then what would be the highest level district it could be rezoned to that would ensure just housing to, I think, protect against at least a part of what member Aboff is raising?
There's it would be an MR district, and then that would eliminate the requirement for the ACE space. But if Brick Bottom is intended to be a arts district, then there's sort of pluses and minuses. There's play there. Yeah, I think and that would be an MR6. And either sort of a apartment building probably, or a general building if there is some mixed use on the ground floor.
That's helpful. So one of the trade-offs is if it goes high rise, it includes the arts requirement. If it doesn't have that requirement. It was my other assumption, am I tracking right, that at least the stated intent is fully housing from the current developer, or is that not accurate?
The intent is housing on the triangle site that's currently the surface parking lot. That's my understanding also.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's good for me now. I mean, maybe to put my cards on the table, just in terms of the sense of sort of polling the group. I love the idea of lots of housing right next to the new Green Line stop, and I love the idea of being nimble to help support a pedestrian connection there. And I like, the use of high rise to make sure that there's still going to be artist space in that parcel. I do hear the process concerns. So that feels tough. And if there is yet another alternative that that member Avoff was suggesting for another way to get most of this with more certainty around playing defense against a sale to another developer, I'd be open to hearing it too.
Director Lewis, can I ask, is there any reason that an MR6 couldn't also be part of a master plan overlay district?
That is a good question. I don't think so. Just because it sort of hasn't happened in a lot of the transform areas. Sort of as far as the underlying zoning, no, it could certainly be part of that.
And to your memory, am I right in thinking that the master plan overlay district does then kick back in the A space requirement?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, Michael.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to say, Member Schuster, thank you for asking those clarifying questions. Those same thoughts were rattling around, so thanks for voicing them. I'd also like to thank Vice Chair Avoff for being the first one to kind of announce some negative feelings, because I also have been sharing some concerns about this, mostly related to the process and the pace. I am not inherently against HR zoning here. I am a little bit hesitant with the amount of negative neighborhood feedback we got in the form of written testimony. And I really like the creative suggestion you just proposed, Vice Chair Avoff. I think mid-rise 6 with the overlay is really interesting to me. To your point, Mr. Chair, I know we're kind of bound on what we can reply with here. But I would personally prefer to be on the conservative end of what we'd be kind of offering here, with the idea at the end of the day that we'd be open, at least I, as one member, would be open to high rise in exchange for sufficient community benefits. As I mentioned earlier, perhaps the developer would be willing to fund that bridge, or maybe there's other benefits, above and beyond the current artists and maker space that we're discussing. And I think that should be, a dialogue between the community and the developer. And I think, all of this takes time. And look, I like Member Schuster, I want to move quickly, especially when it comes to housing. We need a lot of it. We need a lot of it now. But I also don't want to ignore, the feedback that we receive from the neighborhood at the same time. And this does, to me, also as a developer, albeit not as much in real estate, it does also to me feel a little bit like the developer was, not necessarily throwing the kitchen sink at the opportunity, but, kind of reaching far instead of maybe doing as much homework as they could in some of these elements. So, for some of those reasons, I think I lean a little bit more towards the no recommendation with some caveats that the vice chair offered.
Debbie, where you at?
Yeah, no, yeah, Michael and Amelia, I mean, I like the idea of the MR with the overlay. And I'm more inclined to also go no recommendation with our comments to get to what I think will be a better outcome in the end. And the neighborhood concerns that were raised, I mean, that just the opposition did concern me a lot, particularly since we're still in a draft neighborhood plan at the moment. So in my mind, that's problematic. And I'm also sensitive to, I know it's right by the T and we need more housing and we want dense housing, but it's also, you have people that have been living there a long time, have their artist space there a long time, have been heavily engaged in the neighborhood plan process, but it's not quite finished yet. So it just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, that's fine. And it seems like we're generally on the same page. I mean, please acknowledge where we're at, guys. This is a recommendation to the land use committee. We could write a 400-page footnoted thesis and it wouldn't move the needle on what they're going to do anyway. But that's our role. So fine. I think we're all on board with the no recommendation with some commentary on what we think might be a better idea. So I'm happy to move forward with that. I'm not wedded to high rise. I like the idea of being able to mandate some of the outer space that the neighborhood raised concerns about. I also recognize that this neighborhood is slated for transformation generally. It has been for 50 years. So for people to then say, hey, wait a second, my neighborhood's going to change, like this isn't new. So all right, I think we've got a consensus on a no recommendation with comments to the land use committee on where we would think this would be a more perfect plan to make it maybe an MR6 with an overlay with some art space within that overlay. But I will leave it to our staff to send over to me and Amelia a draft recommendation that they think reflects the comments and concerns raised by the board in our recommendation. We'll look over that and make sure that, to our recollection, that it reflects it. I know they were at least initially and primarily Amelia's concerns, so I will certainly not presume to interpret those comments in Amelia's brand and let her do that when we get the draft. So I think we're in a place where we're going to make a no recommendation with comments to the land use committee that reflect the concerns and suggestions raised in this discussion. So I'm going to make that motion. I'm going to ask Amelia to second it. And I'm going to ask Risa to please call the roll.
This is Risa speaking. Michael Capuano.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Okay, you have unanimous vote for a no recommendation, and that Amelia and I will review when we get the draft rec from staff to make sure that it reflects the concerns that were raised and the suggestions that were made tonight. So with no other business before the board at 6:46 p.m., our next regularly scheduled meeting will be a joint hearing with the Land Use Committee on the 19th, where we will take up some additional proposed zoning amendments, as well as potentially some other regularly scheduled business for the board. I move to adjourn, seconded by Amelia. Risa, please call the roll.
This is Risa speaking. Michael Capuano.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Debbie Howard Easton.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
The unanimous vote. We are adjourned, and I will see everybody in a few weeks. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody.